Hi, everyone. How's it going? My name is Ron Shavers. I'm on the Board of Trustees for VCCA, and tonight I'm going to host the 8th Fireside Chat for August 2020. And we have two great writers tonight, two great guests, Michael Montlack and Sejal Shah. They'll be reading from their work. And I'm a writer too, so it's just going to be one big writer round robin. Say that fast 5 times, right? And then we'll take some questions after they read. And I don't know, hopefully by now you've seen a VCCA Fireside Chat. If not, I'd recommend looking at the whole YouTube series, or you can actually catch it on Facebook Live. And yeah, strap in. Let's get ready to go. So a few introductions are in order first. Michael Montlack. Michael Montlack is the author of 2 books of poetry, including Daddy from NYQ Books, which is coming out this September, huzzah, huzzah, and the editor of the Lambda finalist essay anthology, My Diva, 65 Gay Men on Women Who Inspire Them. And that's out by the University of Wisconsin Press, right? Is that it? Okay. Recently, his work has appeared in the North American Review, the Offing, Cincinnati Review, Poet Love, Hotel America, Court Green, and the Los Angeles Review. And his essays have appeared in the Huffington Post and at advocate.com, and he lives in the big fat city, New York City. Sejal Shah, what can I say about Sejal? Sejal is the author of the debut essay collection, This Is One Way to Dance, and that's out by the University of Georgia Press. And her stories and essays have appeared in multiple places, but just to name a few, Brevity, Conjunctions, Guernica, the Kenyan Review, Lit Hub, Long Reads, and the Rumpus. She's also the recipient of a 2018 New York Foundation Fellowship for the Arts Fellowship Award in Fiction. I'm jealous. Sorry, it's New York Foundation for the Arts too, by the way. They'd kill me if I got that wrong. And Sejal, she recently completed a story collection, and she's now back at work on a memoir about mental health. She just started teaching at the Rainier Writing Workshop, Low Res, MFA, out of Pacific Lutheran University, but she lives over in Rochester. All right. So yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. Why don't we start with Michael? Why don't you bedazzle us with some of your work, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. So this is my book. It's coming out in maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, September 7th with New York Quarterly Books. It's called Daddy. And I thought I would read, it has 3 sections, Daddy, Mother, and Father. And I thought I would read 2 poems from each section, and then maybe another poem or so if there's time. This first poem is called Benjamin Unbuttoned. See if I have some light. Okay. Benjamin Unbuttoned. How ancient I was as a child, contained like a nesting doll, little old man at its core, the worrywart, warning my twin sister to stop, jumping on the bed. You'll break a spring. Now nearing 50, I beg my best buddy to rent a bouncy house for his summer bash. We'll oil the sucker up, load it with naked gay guys, bears, come on. Yeah, the one scrawny sissy boy, so heavy with secrecy, fear of being seen, obsessively monitoring where his eyes might creep. Now daring neighbors to jump on in, join us, unless they would rather lounge in their yards and look all you like. Here's one of the Daddy poems. It starts the book. It's called Daddy Mythologies. There's a series of Daddy poems. Daddy Mythologies. You should have seen his face when I said I'd never had sex without condoms. Was it pity, disappointment, or fascination? As if I were a unicorn on display in my bed, his palm petting my chest, as if to calm a beast or soothe a timid child. In his mid-30s, a little more than a decade younger than me, wasn't AIDS a ghost story for him? Was it part of my job to narrate that epic, to conjure the 90s Castro, where I came out, where I nearly passed out, my first Friday night at the bars, seeing men in their mid-30s, a little older than me, so emaciated, so drawn, I had flashbacks to Hebrew school imagery of Holocaust survivors. Only these men would not survive. I tried not to imagine my own face back then. Pity, fear, shock, as if they were unicorns about to disappear. I didn't want to disappear, I tell him, but I can't explain how abandoning condoms feels like abandoning those men. Even when he reminds me about the wonders of PrEP, the intimacy I'm missing, the fear I'm clinging to. I want to explain that fear for me is like homage now. Instead, I tell him we can't date, blaming our age difference. Really, I don't want to explain how I've only been monogamous, knowing he prefers thruples. Too many unicorns. Why add a dinosaur? The next section features poems about mothers in all kinds of ways. So I'm adopted, and with my twin sister, we were adopted from birth. So I have poems about accidentally discovering our birth family by just kind of for fun taking a DNA test to see our ethnicity. All these people fell out of it, including our birth parents who are no longer alive, but relatives who knew them and knew who we were. So I have poems about being adopted or imagining my birth parents and finding out about my birth parents, and poems about my adoptive parents. And in this mother section, it deals with my adoptive mother, my birth mother, as well as my twin sister, who's a mother now, Stevie Nicks, a spiritual mother, Medusa, who was mother of Pegasus, so all sorts of mother figures. So I thought I would read a couple poems from that. I'll start with a Stevie Nicks poem. She's a big muse for me. And one day I wondered what it would be like to write a poem where I'm trying to capture her voice in just images. And it starts with a quote from one of her unpublished songs. And the quote is, "There's the sound of birds rising." That's her line. In her voice, there's the sound of birds rising, not descending, rising, as if punctuating clouds, all commas. Or the stifled whimper of a mother wolf, seeing her runt go limp, composure for the survivor's sake. Maybe some lover's hand, lifting, yoga-like, fingers outstretched like those it points to, Michelangelo's ceiling. A sultry glance from behind oversized sunglasses, saying, without saying, I dig your hip huggers. That umbrella fringe trembling pre-storm, sand sprays softly prickling newly brown legs. Or that woman adjusting her sari in the hot, dry breeze, always a few steps ahead of her husband. And girls, definitely girls, la-lying, twirling before dusty mirrors, where they spy more beautiful versions of themselves. This next poem is one of the ones about my birth mother. It's called, I've Been Told My Birth Mother Believed in Aliens. I've been told my birth mother believed in aliens, that when she was dying of breast cancer, she blamed her pain on things that had fallen from the sky. She was not angry at those things, I've been told. She was not scared of the aliens. I wonder if she was scared of us, the 6 children she birthed and abandoned or surrendered. If maybe we seemed more alien than extraterrestrials, more painful than her cancer, than the anger she might have assumed we harbored toward her. I've been told she ran off to Florida in the 50s, and I wonder if Florida sounded more glamorous to a small-town Pennsylvania girl back then. I've been told she lived for a time in Hollywood, Florida, and I wonder if she loved sending relatives postcards from there, if she pined for the Hollywood in California. She left her husband, I've been told, in the 60s, leaving my older brothers with him. And I wonder what made her leave, and wonder why that impresses me more than it saddens me. Imagining a rebel woman escaping a prescribed fate. Not some villain. No, I've been told she was girlish, sweet. And I wonder if maybe she was just scared, if maybe she was angry and scared of her anger. I wonder if she felt more at home with us as aliens, out there somewhere, far away. And wonder if she wondered about us, wondering if we were angry or scared, or if we wondered about her, waiting for her to make contact. I'll read 2 short ones from the father section, which are poems about my father that raised me and losing my father. This is called One Sparrow. One sparrow circles the bridge as if to signify a need, its arcs nearly complete, dismantled figure eights. The river wrinkles its reflection like a shooting black star aimed for its place in an unfinished constellation. Where is the flock? Sky on the cusp of twilight, the sparrow sweeps in the dark, and your voice dangles from it, my ears recognizing this much. Son, you are a man of few words in life, too. So in the father section, it gets into some poems about being an uncle. So this is called When You Say Uncle. When you say uncle, I sometimes hear father, a foreign country I never planned to visit. Still you take me there when you say uncle, feeding me a half-eaten cookie, repeatedly asking your mother why I have to go home. When you say uncle, I realize I am home. When you say uncle, it is enough. I'll read one more from this book. This is a proem where I get the image for the book cover, the tattoo of the seahorse. I have like a proem that starts off before the 3 sections. I was always fascinated by the fact that seahorses are the only species where males give birth. So this is called How to Mother Like a Man. I like how the male seahorse gives birth, making it easier for the female exhausted from egg production. How the round puffed belly looks like my father's beer gut. How despite the protrusion, he appears sleek in suspension, ornately ridged, that curlicue tail coiled demurely until it's ready to link with his mate, who inflates him with life. A live chessboard piece moving nonchalantly in the current, gentle but with intention. A knight, really, doing whatever it takes to protect the queen. And I don't know if I have time, but I thought I would read 2 other shorter poems. One's from another project, which I'm writing about now, about clowns and comedians. So hold on one second. This is called Court Jester. It's a persona poem. Tethered to the throne by my own talent, of course I relish the power sometimes to light a gloomy countenance, my quips, my acrobatics, like trained lightning bolts, how the court in all their finery folded over their fat middles, snorting like boars at feeding time. At my best, I snatched their hot air, letting it inflate my breast. And yes, I despise the king, the same way a parent abhors an infant whose shrieks shatter the serene night. Wars plague the queen lame with another bout of gout. He needed to play, to suckle, to forget. And didn't I need someone to rescue? To forget I was unable to rescue myself. It was most lonesome at night, the chill in the stone walls seeping into my blood, extinguishing the torch of my creativity. The nightmares came in tapestry scenes, how I'd eventually fall, out of fashion, out of favor, a stale loaf of peasant bread on a table jammed with cheese and goose. Queer, crippled, I would have been a true fool not to be waiting for a shove through the gate, for the drawbridge to rise behind me. Always I heard the growling stomachs of his beasts, ready for a snack. The last joke on me. But make no mistake, I knew love, not the kind the milkmaid dreamed of, nor the kind the queen gave up on. No, I had the attention of the king, at his weakest, at his proudest. How many can say that? Exactly. I had that man by the balls. Only I could tickle them the way he liked. I think I'll leave with that. Thanks again for having me.
Wow, no, thanks. That was awesome. I'm just gonna snap. Wow, thank you so much. We are gonna take questions from Michael after we have both readers read, so please hold your questions until then. But now we will have Sejal. And Sejal is going to read from your memoir, right? That just debuted, correct? This is One Way to Dance.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ron, and VCCA and Michael. Congratulations again, Michael, on the starred review in Publishers Weekly. And Ron's book, Silverfish, is coming. They're both coming out in September, so Daddy and Silverfish. I'm going to be reading from This Is One Way to Dance, which came out in June. It's an essay collection, or a memoir and essays. And I'm going to be reading from a short essay called Temporary Talismans, which is about writing postcards. And I'm thinking a lot about, my book is about race, place, and belonging. And we just got these from the post office, Gwen Eiffel. Just the importance of books and the post office, libraries and the post office. And this was the way to travel and to stay connected, and how important these are. So this is Temporary Talismans. There's a postcard I've kept propped on my desk on a bookshelf or protected in a drawer since middle school. I don't know what attracted me to that particular postcard from Germany. Perhaps it was that I had not yet traveled out of the country other than to go to Canada. But it always felt more mysterious to me than that. The image even surfaced in a story I wrote several years ago called The Girl with Two Brothers. Quote, "We walk toward a mountain. We long for the curve in the road. We look at each other, heads leaning in. You are carrying a staff. The girl's face is happy. I could never see your face." The postcard shows a pair of children embarking on a journey. They resemble my idea of Hansel and Gretel, though on a happier trek. I think I most likely found the card at one of those pop-up fairs of antiques, collectibles, and memorabilia that suburban malls used to host in their large corridors and courtyards. I loved looking at old bottles, books, and ephemera. And I bought this one card. It had been sent already. It was used, and it was perfect. According to Christian McEwen in her thoughtful and timely book, World Enough in Time, on creativity and slowing down, we've lost something by losing our paper correspondence, letters and postcards. McEwen writes that, quote, "Because of their brevity and the play between words and image, postcards are perhaps especially potent." McEwen meditates on the corporeality of the postcard as an art object, as a temporary talisman. I have one of my favorites here. She writes, "And the pleasure of a postcard in and of itself, a tiny icon which can be propped on a mantelpiece or a bedside table, attached with magnets to the fridge, slipped into the edge of a mirror or pasted on the front of a journal, is a loss that no one even seems to mourn. And yet a postcard, just because it is so cheap, so light, so portable, can be astonishingly resilient and evocative. Who has not opened a book to find a battered postcard thrust between the pages? Who has not puzzled over a date, a smudgy postmark, and read the message from so long ago, studying the ease or awkwardness of phrasing, the swirl of a signature?" I have 3 friendships that grew out of postcard correspondences. I met Wendy and Holly at an artist residency 14 and 6 years ago, respectively, and Michael at a conference 11 years ago. We were all already writers, but 4 of us individually also had a practice of writing postcards to friends, and we all still do. I've never lived in the same area as these friends, and the 3 of us have moved in the ensuing years. Between us, we've relocated in that time from or to Michigan, New York, Massachusetts, Iowa, Maine, and Washington State. When a letter or postcard arrives in the mail, I would and I do recognize each of their handwriting without a signature. It gives me such pleasure to know their handwriting. In general, I don't know the handwriting of my newer friends. Michael mentions peonies from when he lived in Syracuse. Holly writes of books and walks in her balletic, elegant script. Wendy's letters fill the page, billowing clouds, a kind of kinetic energy. I see a sail filled, telling me of the relief she feels that the school year is over. What does it mean to take the time to write a card and procure a stamp when I can message any one of them on Facebook or text or email? It's not that I do not email or message or text them now. I have and I do. But we still write postcards. Postcards lend themselves to in a quiet way, to cultivating a new friendship or courting a new friend, which is perhaps why we began that way. But why do we continue? It's a quality of mind I'm trying to describe. A postcard arises from a quiet place before picking up the pen. It's about attention and intention, though there can also be something breezy or even rushed, offhand about a postcard. Now a postcard reads more deliberately than an email. Postcards are incomplete, imperfect, and often say something about one's travel or daily life. They free us from the sense of having to write something extraordinary or profound. They are a first and only draft. For me as a writer, that's such a relief. It's a snapshot of a life. I often edit emails, but in postcards, it's okay to be free-ranging, to not get everything or even anything special in. All is forgiven, and the stakes are low. The gesture itself takes some effort and care. It's an unexpected bit of happiness in the mail. Sometimes a flash of watercolor or a small quote, writing what we were doing and thinking, an acknowledgement of the card just received, a picture for no reason. An email wants something from you, an answer, some information, a reply. A postcard asks for nothing. It is a gift. The postcard I've kept for so many years, it's not currently in rotation on my desk, but I safeguard it in a box with a few other talismans, art objects, muse collars. There's a phrase in German on the picture side of the card. According to Google Translate, it means out in the distance. In all those years, I had never bothered to look it up. I didn't need to. The image had its own potency. It gave me words. It spoke to me as if from a dream, and I trusted it fully. To step onto the path with a sense of wonder, whether setting off to write something or on an actual journey, a pilgrimage. The card said nothing ordinary, extraordinary, or perhaps what it said was essential, only words, a message. No punctuation, a sort of poem. We arrived, / here today, / everything is, / great, Balmy and Esther. This week while out of town, I went to IKEA. After I gave up sticking to my list, I left the Swedish behemoth with, among other things, a pack of postcards. The illustrations are of single birds, though no blue jays, and therefore have nothing to do with Toronto, where I bought them. Still, I fancied the pale green background and the image of a solitary bird perched on each card. I will send them to Michael, Wendy, and Holly when I get home. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sejal. That was great. That was great.
I got postcards for the book.
Cool. Wow. Well, speaking of that, why don't you hold up your book, Michael and Sejal, so everyone can see? Right. Sejal is out right now, wherever fine books are sold, and you can get it at Bookshop too, correct? Right?
Yes.
So yeah, you can actually link to the VCCA website and get it. Daddy comes out on September 7th. And once again, congratulations, because we just found out today that you got a starred review in Publishers Weekly. So woot, you know it's good, right? And Silverfish comes out in September 8th.
Woohoo!
Yeah, so huzzah, let's big up ourselves, right?
And this is from this is a card I did have from a fellow from VCCA, Katrin Huber. So,
oh wow,
a beautiful painter.
That is an amazing card. Wow, cool. Thanks so much. Okay, well, let's talk about, I just want to sort of open it up, and there's so many different ways we can go to this, but I noticed that there's a kind of really ephemeral quality to both of your works, meaning that, Michael, you take these small kind of, what almost seem to be throwaway moments, and you just construct these like fantastic little castles out of them, right? And, Sejal, like your thing with, say, for example, postcards, I've read some of your other stuff, so I'm wondering if you could just maybe kind of just, if you could, you can always tap out. But like, if you could just elaborate on what attracted you to these small little particular things, just why that really kind of like drew you in. Is it too broad of a question?
Michael, you want to go first, or shall I?
Oh, you can go.
I think that well, when I wrote that essay, it was when I was writing a column for the Kenyan Review blog, and it was nice to have that deadline every 2 weeks. And I loved that it's sort of like it's the Anne Lamott thing, right? It's just the 1-inch picture frame, just starting with something small. That it didn't have to be, you know, because it still is about connection and friendships and relationships. And now I think when I read this differently now with the post office under siege. So it's the common good.
Okay. Yeah. And, you know, oh, sorry, and just wearing my manners, because it wouldn't be an actual fireside thing with a glass of wine. So without a glass of wine, so cheers, everyone. Right?
Cheers, everyone.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, Michael, there's such a wistful aspect to some of your poems too. I was just wondering if you know, really sort of, if you could maybe just approach the same question.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, I love certain details and, you know, not technical things, but, you know, yeah, it's almost like photography, which I studied a little bit when I was in college too, that when I kind of experience a poem, when someone connects, it's almost like a shutter goes off. And so I'm just thinking about like the bouncy house, you know, so my friend Will would have a party every summer and I would organize it for him, and he has a big backyard upstate, and I would, you know, jokingly but not say, let's get a bouncy house, like, you know, why not, like, and you know, and I kind of would tease every year about that, and but then I thought about that, like, what's that about? And then the detail comes to mean more when I think about how, you know, when I was a kid in the closet, I had a good childhood, I had a great family, but I always felt worried about being outed or, you know, knowing that I was different or dealing with homophobia, you know, and so I felt like a little old man, you know. And then as I get older, the older I get, the more playful, the further I get away from that, the more boyish I feel in a lot of ways, though I'm a responsible person. And I think, like, you know, then the bouncy house takes on meaning, like it's the big joke every time we plan the party, but then that little detail becomes representative of that experience of kind of, you know, growing young, the further I get away from being closeted. So that's one example in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you guys have questions for Sejal, just feel free to jump in, right? I don't want to kind of dominate everything, but I was sort of curious as to, you know, I mean, it really struck me that you're doing this sort of like this familial thing, but also just that even the title of your collection, Daddy, right? Can be taken so many different ways. Well, you know, so I mean, is there like an intentional ambiguity there, or you know, like, you know, especially when given the cover, right? You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it worked on a lot of levels because, you know, this was a period recently where I lost my birth parents, and I also discovered accidentally. I mean, I lost my adoptive parents, and I accidentally discovered my birth parents. And then, you know, aging as a gay man, you know, was interesting because, you know, where I felt sort of invisible when I was younger, you know, I get older, and then all these young, you know, guys in their 20s are like, "Hey, Daddy," and I'm like, where did they get the compliment? You know, "Hey, Daddy, let me buy you a beer," you know, and I'm like, surprised when I, you know, got into my 40s. I'm thinking, well, this is fun, but wasn't what I was expecting. But then, you know, I feel like the book has a lot of different kinds of daddies, you know, and then just the whole thing. I feel that a lot of my work has feminist themes, and just even the, you know, the whole seahorse thing was a fascination. And, you know, my father was a mechanic. He was sort of rough around the edges, but he had like this one little jewelry box set that my mother probably bought him for his watch and his, you know, his ring or whatever. And it, you know, they had like sort of a seahorse on it. And when I thought of my father, there weren't many things like that, you know, in his, you know, he was just working on cars and building furniture. But I remember the seahorse. And so it attaches that way with my father. And, yeah, so it kind of comes in a lot of ways, but with, you know, parenting and, you know, my sister becoming a parent and, you know, sort of being an uncle figure to my friends' kids and my own nieces in some ways. And so that, yeah, so kind of wrapped up. And then just the whole playfulness. I like poems that are playful. I like having fun, even if it's a serious topic. And I feel like the whole naughty kind of, "Hey, Daddy," was a fun thing to play with as well. But just, I never thought twice about it. My other book, I had a lot of shifting of titles, and this was like, this is Daddy. That's, you know, I like although there's no Sylvia Plath in it, like, you know, that was a poem I always loved by her. You know, it's really dark, and my poems are usually a little lighter. So, yeah. Oh, I wanted to say too that I saw some of my friends. I don't know how to see who's in this room. I don't know if that's possible, but I did see comments from friends, and I just wanted to say, if you're here, I don't know. I saw some comments and I want to say thanks. I saw some of them. And if you're not here, if you are here, let me know at some point, because I don't know. I didn't get to see who's here. And so I saw a few of you, and thank you for coming.
Well, I'm sure if they're not here, they'll just like travel through the ether and
Yes, it's great to get to see these comments. I don't know if we can respond. I haven't used StreamYard before, but so thank you, Willa and Sarah and Carrie and Margot and Angela. Michael was just mentioning you from our silent retreat. It's kind of amazing.
Oh yeah,
all these connections. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes. Like, thanks everybody for even showing up. And
yes.
Like, this is great. And I wanted you, Sejal, to kind of talk about, because this is your first book. So if you could just talk about the journey from this, I mean, like, and the piece you just read, actually, it's in the work, but it originally, like, as you said, it originally appeared in the Kenyan Review, right? And you were blogging for them. So what was that like the journey from your first book to, or from initially writing it to actually now, right? The journey of the book.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was really hard to take work that I'd written for different reasons over different time periods when I was a different person, over 20 years, and put it together in a book. And I'm so grateful for the 3 weeks I had at VCCA and just the conversations with fellows there just about work, right? And, what does it mean? And I was crying at a Zoom call that Margot that we started to do. And I just said, I didn't know, obviously, there was going to be a pandemic and Black Lives Matters and George. And I said, I would do everything differently. I wish I could go back in and, we're in a different world. And they just said, next book, like, this is like, you have to keep moving forward, right? Like, a book is a record of where you've been. And I was working, I think I was going through some proofs when I was there, and it's been such a journey, even though I have lots of friends who've written books. I think to go through it yourself, it's, I think it was similar to, this is based on a video of me turning in an outfit that I didn't buy for my wedding. And, but I did write about getting married later in the book. And I also was kind of shocked that it turns out like getting married is really different than going to a wedding. I'd gone to lots of weddings, so I thought,
Okay. Well,
yeah. What did you say, Ron?
I said how, right?
Oh, yeah.
The whole commitment.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking of that. It was just, I think there are certain things that we go through that change you, that are like a crucible. And that's what a friend described wedding as. And also, I think the process of publishing a book, maybe, I don't know what it's like to publish one not in a pandemic. So I think it was also like having to trust that the book would find its readers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still learning. It's
a wonderful sentiment, Yeah. Michael, you care to jump in on this, or are you just going to sit back and
about publishing in a pandemic?
Actually, I was more curious on because
Well, you write about time I mean, that's interesting to me about, youth and getting older. How many years? Sorry, Ron, I'm jumping in. How long did it take you to write the poems in your book?
Yeah, this book was interesting because last year I've been writing poems. I had a book before, and then I had been writing poems, and I was working on this series about clowns and comedians, which is gathering a little bit of a grouping now. But I had all these other poems that I felt like were sort of just in a pile, and I was in Portland, Oregon for the AWP conference, and I stayed an extra week because I love that town. And I just kind of looked through my poems, and it just kind of hit me really fast, and I realized, there it is. I saw the 3 sections. I saw all these daddy poems, all the mother poems, all the father poems, and then I thought, I have about 45 pages, and I thought maybe I can show my publisher and see what he thinks. But I already, at that point when it hit me, it came really fast. I wrote the Seahorse poem, which I saw as like a poem. So I had been writing the poems for a while, and I had all these others as well, but these sort of just popped out when I was looking through my stuff, thinking like, I've been writing, what's emerging here? And then it hit me about a year and a half ago. And then I took about a year, maybe a little bit less than that, to fill in the blanks and write like another 15. A lot of the ones I read actually were the new ones, like the ancient, My Brother and Aliens. A lot of those were brand new. The Seahorse poem, the Budget Unbuttoned. So I kind of was filling in gaps to, like, make connective tissue. So yeah, so it was a quick book in a way, but then it wasn't, because a lot of the other poems were written years and years ago. That's when I start writing poems, I don't know what I'm doing yet. Like, just like with that clown and comedian thing, I wrote a few poems. I wrote a Joan Rivers poem, a B. Arthur poem, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, this is kind of fun. I wrote the Court Jester poem, and just kept going. And then you're like, oh, I want to develop this.
Michael, did you think was it important that you were traveling, right? Like, you were in Portland, I was there too, but I sometimes feel like I'm missing that perspective right now with the pandemic, like what going to a residency or going away, being in a different place seems to help with seeing your work in a different way. I think it was great to be around my writer friends for a few days, and then they all left and I stuck around. I like Portland. I've been there a lot, and I felt comfortable. I was just going to like the cafe I hung out at every day, and I was working on stuff for school, but also cafes. Yeah.
But place is a big thing. But place and people are big things in my work. I don't, it lends itself to almost fiction in that way. I love using dialogue, and I traveled a lot the last bunch of years. Actually, I saw an Australian friend who I met in Australia a few years ago, and it's wild that he said it's wild to be able to read online now and have more people show up from around the country. But I travel a lot. This summer, I drove across country, because I'm in New York City, and after being in quarantine for 2 months, and I was really self-isolated because I lived alone and my family was on Long Island, and I had friends that were in the city that were sort of vulnerable. I didn't want to, who knew what was happening. So after 2 months of quarantine, I said, I'm renting a van, putting a bed in the back, like an air mattress, a cooler, and I just drove across country and back, and saw people in national parks and friends on the way, but I called it social long distancing. So travel is very important to me, and I used that time because it was going to be time for my book tour, because my book was going to come out in April. And when that was happening, I had saved a little bit of money for that, and I thought, well, I just can't sit around all summer, doing that. And I thought I'd rather be in a van driving through nature and seeing the country. I don't know if that answers your question, but it brings up the whole idea. I think the online thing is bringing my work to more friends. I got friends, in California and different places that I did one other online reading, and it was just really fun to get people that way. But
Okay. I had an interesting thing to kind of segue on, just in terms of that, and how, like, change of places and locations can kind of alter that stuff. Because I know I did, I wrote and revised a lot of Silverfish at VCCA, and it was really and I was just sort of wondering, what VCCA or how it's maybe kind of influenced your work, because I know that part of it was actually just being at all the kind of fireside readings and everything else, where, you kind of like leave a little puffed up, like, wait, I can, like, just hearing this, or maybe it's just me, I don't know, it's like, wow, that's like, to see all these different people do different things makes you sort of want to branch out in different ways. And maybe I'm answering the question that I'm intending to ask you, but I was just sort of wondering, maybe what VCCA itself, and maybe being there, like, how you think it sort of changed, maybe, if not your work or your process, or how have you sort of imbibed it?
Well, it influenced me a lot. I've gone a few times to VCCA. I've loved every time. I've met really interesting people, and I would connect with visual artists. And I had a book that had a book cover from a woman that I met there. My apartment went really black. Now I'm like a floating head in this darkness, but and I don't want to get up and turn on the light. But on my walls is work from a visual artist that I met, Deb Mell, in VCCA. And just the other day, someone was looking at it and said, wow, that's a great painting. Oh, yeah, it was a VCCA. And she asked me, she had a whole series of paintings with sequins and really beautiful things. And she said, I have to name them for my galleryist. And there were 30 pieces in it. And I was like, oh, don't you like that? And she said, no, I hate words. And I said, well, I'll do it. And she gave me a bottle of wine, left her studio, and I sat there naming the paintings. And then I got so attached that I said, I want to buy one, and I don't know if I could. She gave me a really great deal, and now I have one on my wall. So it's exciting. But I've worked with different visual artists and even musicians, and been a part of their projects, and then the other writers as well. And so collaboration, like writing and poetry could be very isolating. So just being around those people at night at the dinner table was amazing to me, to have the conversations, and then visiting studios and going to the Fireplace readings and just it was really one of the best things about the whole experience, and led to a lot of collaborations that I would have never had. So.
Yeah, I think walking on the grounds and going to Sweetbriar. I'd never been to Virginia, and actually, my family, they were just like, why don't you fly there? I drove, and I got to stay en route with a friend from childhood who teaches at James Madison, and I'd never been to Virginia. So actually just like having that time and space in the car, then meeting fabulous people. And I'd never been to a residency where people are coming and going so much. And so even people that were just there the first couple of days, I'm still in touch with. And there were Katrin was a big swimmer, and she's there from Austria, I think. And so, we were carpooling to go to the gym, and the conversations that you have, I think it was so helpful to have that kind of perspective for me when looking at this work from 20 years and then talking to a composer and talking to other writers, and the serendipity of that. I think I'm just super grateful, because I haven't been traveling at all since early March. So I am not taking it for granted. And in fact, I'm, getting verklempt. It's great that you went.
But you got a Wegman, so.
Hey, right. Wait, are you in Albany, Ron? Yeah.
Wegmans. It's just like.
Exactly. I guess they have them in Virginia too.
All right. Well, there was yeah. Go ahead. Izzy. Were you going to say something?
Oh, who? Me?
Oh, okay. Then never mind. Well, one of the things I also was sort of curious about is just and I just kind of wanted you guys to maybe touch on it, because not like all three of us were not these pure, scare quotes, right, genre writers. We tend to work in multiple genres. Like, Michael, you're an essayist as well as a poet. Sejal, you're all of them. Like, you write fiction, you do essays, you do all this other stuff, right? Even sort of like some of it's based in like yogic practice and everything else too, right? It's like I'm trained as like a literary critic as well, and like all this kind of stuff. So, I was sort of wondering, like, just if we could, how you kind of incorporate all that, how it all kind of comes out in the work. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Right?
I really struggled with genre. I just gave and I wrote some craft essays for poets and writers about this. But my original training was as a poet, but I did an MFA in fiction, and I have a background in dance. And I realized that that I wanted. In fact, I have this. Oh, 1 second.
All right. That really was a second. Wow. Okay.
Sorry, I just had to grab this. I just taught Bad Indians, and this is written by Margot Soled's wife, Deborah Miranda, and it has. It's a cross-genre work. It's so beautiful. Bad Indians. You should read it. Tribal memoir. And I realized that I actually wanted more things in my book, more more textures, more ephemera, and I hadn't done that. So a part of it for me was trying to figure out how to translate something that did feel like it was multiple genres into. But Georgia came knocking for the Crux series, and it's nonfiction. So then I made some decisions, and some stories became essays, some stories got pushed out. And if I had had an in-person book launch, there would have been dancing. And I'm still thinking about how to do that for, I love that you just even like going out in the 90s, right? Like we should be out, but this is my study. So I knew I wanted like motion in there, but it was, that's why I'm so grateful to get to talk to visual artists. I feel like I learned so much, and poets, because what it looked like on the page for me was really important. And the people who got that the most, I think, are poets.
Well, I studied fiction, wrote short stories in my undergraduate, and my first master's degree was both fiction writing, and poetry was always my dirty, little secret. And I wrote it, but I didn't really talk about it or try to get it out there. And then I went back for another degree, my MFA at New School in poetry. And then I had my first book, and it was nonfiction. So that makes a lot of sense. And interestingly, you talk about dance. When I launched that book, it was the Diva book. It was where I got gay men to write essays about the women who inspired them. And it came from my essay on Stevie Nicks. And then I kind of and expanded it into that project, which was really fun. I had my friend Jen, she's a belly dancer, and she danced at my book release party, belly danced and in diva fashion. So that was really, really amazing. So yeah, it was always kind of funny where it's like I'm studying fiction, and then I'm studying poetry, and then my first book is nonfiction. And then I went back to the poetry, but my poetry tends to be narrative a lot of times. And I really bring in elements of fiction. I love dialogue. I love character. I love setting, place, landscape. So all that, that stuff has really influenced my poetry. And so in terms of genre, I just kind of went with it. But yeah, you never know where you're going to end up. But I think whatever project you're working on, it's going to tell you what it needs to be, I
mean, we're multidimensional, right? And that's the thing. Like, I think genre it's about sometimes marketing, right? Like being able to say this is this, but we're different when we're at residencies, and we're different when we're teaching, and we're different when we're at a meditation retreat, right? Like we're multifaceted. So
Cool. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, okay. Finally, there was one thing I did sort of want to just I was sort of curious about, and that's just like trying to kind of connect it back to the narratives and sort of like the primacy of kind of one's identity as a kind of creative driver, or if I could maybe even just reframe that to a less like kind of cuckoo fancy pants way, right? Sort of like writing, well, okay, let me give the complicated version and the simple version, writing from one subject position, right? And that's just, say, because Sejal, like you actually do tend to write a lot about your background and your heritage, Michael, it's there on the page for you, especially, right? Just in terms of like your kind of sexual orientation. So I was sort of wondering kind of like, what particular pitfalls and benefits, or what are like the kind of things that really make it worth mining, if you know what I mean. That came out really kind of clunkily.
Are you talking about, Ron, about identity, like what we put forth?
Well, there's one's identity as a writer, and then there's one's identity as a person. Yeah, right. And we both know that they're different, right? But just sort of really kind of putting forth and just like basing one's work in this whole kind of like in a kind of particular sort of thing of like, I'm writing from a gay male perspective, or I'm writing from a kind of South Asian perspective. getting that together?
I'd be happy to talk about that. In fact, I think I was just back from VCCA, and then I wanted a subtitle, and they said it was too late because the cover had already been designed, and I was like, no. And it was, I think, essays on race, place, and belonging.
Yeah.
But I feel like I struggled with that because I didn't write as, for example, maybe as directly about class or sexuality, but that doesn't mean that those aren't important facets of my life that I think about. Mm-hmm. So, when my mother read the book, she was like, why didn't you write about that, when you went to China? Or, you could only, I could have chosen other essays and it would have come out differently. And it's been interesting to hear readers, people's takes on it, right? Like I think I did certainly explore what it meant to me to grow up Gujarati and South Asian American. Yeah. But I didn't, my mother is from Kenya, and there's more there. I would write a different book about race. Now I grew up in Rochester, the county, the city, and suburbs are really hyper segregated, and what that is like in these, after redlining and these micro environments, and the experience of race, away from major cities. So I feel like, I don't know. I think that's one of the things that's hard about placing a book in a certain way, right? Like if we changed up the order, right? If I had some other essays that were about like what books we keep, or I published an essay last year that I actually read at Sweetbriar for one of the fellows readings that was about neurodiversity and invisible disability and managing a mood disorder. So if that had been at the forefront of the book would read differently. Right. Okay. So I don't have an answer to it. I think it, like, at least I feel like I'm always changing. Mm-hmm. So this is a record of what I did at that time.
Oh, keep dancing too.
Right. I mean, that's the thing.
All right. Okay. I don't know. I'm sort of curious, just because, like, it's sort of like, especially in this moment where race has come such an incredible kind of forefront. Yeah. I think it's just sort of important to kind of mark it and just see what kind of comes of it.
Ron, you cut out
all kind of just. Oh, gosh. Okay. Well,
I think what you were saying, that race has come to the forefront in this. Yeah, I mean, it's erupted in a way that I think that we needed, it had to, but I do think it's changed everything too. So if I were putting a book together right now, I think it would look very different, and that's.
Okay. Well, then here's like the last question then, right? Unless if there are any questions from like the audience, we can take them. But I do have a last kind of question for you, right? Both, right? Speaking of that, so then maybe what would you like to what's next? Or what do you see kind of creatively? Do you have like a next project, or are you sort of moving towards something? What's sort of bouncing around in your head?
Well, I made this reading list for Electric Literature that was about like women of color talking back, and writing about mental health. And I think that when I looked at my book, I looked at what I hadn't written about, where the silences and gaps were, and that's where I decided I needed to write more. That there was more to say about both race and mental health. Mm-hmm. And I missed, after publishing a nonfiction book, I definitely missed the kind of cover that fiction and poetry, I think, can give you, like a code. I think sometimes people read nonfiction as like, this is straight. And I tried to place it as, for me, it's a queer genre, but I feel like a book is also a map, right? It shows you maybe areas that you haven't explored as much. So I wanted to play a little bit more with fiction, and also to write into those into the things that I hadn't written about.
Michael, it's sort of an unfair question because, I mean, you might be wrapped up in Daddy right now. I mean, you might still have Daddy on the brain because it's coming out in about, what, 2-3 weeks, right?
Well, yeah, I'm promoting that some, and that's, you know, exciting. But you know, the book's been written for a while, so I've really been working on these clown comedian poems. Like I have a B. Arthur poem coming out soon, and so I'm having fun with that stuff. But I've actually written a young adult novel. And yeah, and when you were talking before about identity, it's interesting because I do deal with a lot of queer stuff, not, you know, not exclusively in my poetry, but I try not to think about that stuff as I'm doing it, and then maybe afterwards reflect on it. But this young adult novel is from the point of view of an obese 15-year-old girl, and that was a really interesting experience to write because it really took me out in a lot of ways. But there's a lot of me in that book still at some point, so that's something that I want to get back to as well, because it's written, but I just kind of want to figure a few things out before I kind of put it out in the world if I can. So that's, yeah, so I'm going back to fiction now, I guess, you know.
Yeah, wow. Cool. Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited to read that. I have a young adult novel in me too, and I think, I mean, I think it's a place where there's a lot of exciting ground to cover.
Cool. All right, thank you guys. This has been really kind of great. I think we should probably wrap it up, though. I mean, we're cutting into, like, you know, DNC time.
Yeah.
Oh, right, I forgot. Yeah. Oh, I just saw that your comment about my earrings. These are my mother's from the 70s. Aren't they fabulous?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I hope she's watching.
Well, thank you so much, right? And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Right?
Thank you for being here. Thank you for hosting.
No, it's not a problem, right?
Thank you, VCCA.
Yep. Well, yep. Thanks
Buy
to
these books.
VCCA, and thank you, you know, Kim and Sheila and all the staff of VCCA for making everything that we do possible, right? Once again, right? The titles of the books. I want you to hold up your books here, right? You know, this is One Way to Dance by Sejal Shah, right? Daddy by Michael Montlack, and Silverfish by me. Okay, so
beautiful cover. They're all great covers.
Yeah, Matthew Revere. He's a genius.
Wow.
Genius. Yeah, right. So
really gorgeous.
Yeah. So thanks everyone, and have a great night.